Hello and welcome to Just One More Watch. Here at the Just One More Watch channel, we love a retro reissue. Why do people say that? Why do people on YouTube use the Royal We when there's clearly only one of them? I don't understand it. I love a retro reissue. I have reviewed a ton of them on the channel over the last few years, and I assume a number of you love a retro reissue as well, judging by the sales of these watches. Timex have relaunched their entire brand based on their back catalogue pretty much, starting with the Marlin, then the Q, and then the M79. So it's no wonder that other big brands such as Orient want a little piece of that pie. Orient last year released the Super King Diver, a faithful reissue of one of their 1970s watches. And I wish they hadn't, because it's one of the ugliest things I have ever seen. Now, I didn't just buy this, it is kindly on loan to me from a Melbourne-based subscriber called David. David and I have done a number of watch trades over the last few years. I saw he'd picked up one of these when he listed it for sale. Then he dropped the price. Then he dropped the price. Then he dropped the price, and still nobody bought it. So he sent it over to me so that I could roast it. This thing is so ugly in so many different areas that I don't even know where to start. But I'm gonna try. Let's flip the camera and roast it. Let's be honest, 1970s design can be a bit hit or miss, shall we say. For every Lamborghini Countach, there's a Triumph TR7. For every Citroen SM, there's an Austin Allegro, a car they launched with a square steering wheel that was more drag coefficient going backwards than it was going forwards. And it's the same with the world of watches. For every Patek Philippe Nautilus, there's an Orient Super King Diver. I thought I may as well rip off the band-aid and just go straight for the zoom shot today. Sorry if any of you have just been a little bit sick in your mouths. That thing is pretty much a hot mess. And unfortunately, it's exactly the same hot mess that Orient were selling in the 1970s. So we can't even say that it got lost in translation somewhere with this reissue. Unfortunately, it is a faithful reissue of the 1970s model. I'm not sure how many people were standing outside of the Orient factory with placards campaigning for this one to be relaunched. Surely there are less unappealing models in the Orient back catalogue. And what price all of this gaudiness? Well, they're not cheap either. $225 is the best price I could find on eBay. That's more expensive than the far more capable Komatsu. And I genuinely think this is one of the ugliest watches that I have reviewed on the channel to date. There are just so many individual separate elements that I don't like, combined into a watch that doesn't carry any or all of them off. Check the case, for example, 41.7mm. Now that is a carryover from the original, so it was a fairly big watch for the 1970s, but it's curved on one side and angled on the other. I've got no problem with that per se, but have a look at it from the side. 13mm thick, which is okay, 46 lug to lug, again quite compact. But look at those crowns. They're not in the same plane. The 3 o'clock crown operates the movement as normal. That is the inner rotating bezel crown. I'll come back to that monstrosity later on. It's on a different plane of alignment to the 3 o'clock crown. It just looks awful. 18mm lug width. There's a bit of a flare out to 22. It narrows down to 15.5. So we've got 41.7 going to 15.5. That is a huge taper. Reminds me of the Rolex Explorer 2 or one of those old deep sea dwellers. Massive taper that is not going to wear well. Back up to 17.5 at the clasp. Sized up for me, I only had to remove one of the rolled links. I'll get to that later on as well. 117 grams. So I've got a 7-inch wrist. If you have a much bigger wrist than I have, you're probably not going to be wearing this one anyway. Let's have a look at the bracelet then, specifically how well it integrates with the case. The bracelet is all brushed, the case is all polished. They don't even try. I have not seen that ever, I don't think. Surely they could have done a high polished end link there. I guess the original probably had brushed, which is why they haven't even tried, or that'll be Orient's excuse anyway. And it is rolled links, so it's a hair nipper. The clasp here, it's a double push button, pressed, not milled. 2 holes, 2 micro adjust holes, so you're probably not going to get a great fit from it either. But let's have a look at the dial. There are three different colours, the blue, which is arguably the best, a magenta, which is arguably the worst, and this gold one, which I feel anyway, sits somewhere in the middle. There's that kind of badger stripe of gold running up the middle, fading towards the edges. There's those 10 circular gold markers, which I'm not quite sure why they're there, given that there are hour markers beyond that on a minute track and hour markers beyond that on the inner rotating bezel. At least the logo is applied and it looks quite good. SK for Super King printed with crystal and 22 jewel above the index at 6, the baton index at 6. Fairly simple gold handset, and there is a bit of lume. In its defence, the lume is kind of okay if this watch was $100, but for $225 you would be expecting more, especially as this is still labelled as a dive watch. How can it possibly be a dive watch though when this only has 50 metres of water resistance? They really have copy and pasted the original with all of the inherent failings of the original, including an inner rotating bezel that just looks plain ugly and doesn't feature any lume, I'm sure you noticed, so you cannot use this one as a serious dive watch for a number of different reasons. It looks like one of those Oruses or Seikos that you buy from a eBay seller in India, even though you know in your heart of hearts that it was 6 different watches at one point, all combined into one. This has the look and the feel of 6 different watches all combined into one as well. It does have one redeeming feature though, and that is a decent movement. It's the same movement that powers the Ray 2, the Mako 2 and the newer Komatsu. It's an Orient in-house caliber 6922, 22 jewel hacking and hand winding auto running at 21,600 vibrations per hour. This one running solidly +5 +6 seconds per day with 0 beat error. And that's what it looks like on wrist. Unfortunately, you are going to have to look at it if you want to use it as a watch and you want to know what time it is. I've got a 7-inch wrist for your reference. It's top heavy, it's ungainly, and there is too big a taper, I think, from the 41.7 all the way down to 15.5. This bracelet is light and flimsy. Most of the weight is in the head of the watch as well, which means it's going to bobble around if you wear it loose, and if you wear it loose, it's going to have your arm hair for breakfast. Overhead shot, nope, I'm sorry, it's not any more attractive from further away. Those kind of 4 pop rivets in the corners of the case do nothing for it in my opinion either. And that is a mineral crystal before you ask. They haven't even updated the glass. And that's it outside. Unfortunately, it doesn't look any better in natural light than it does under my studio lights. And when I put it on wrist, again, you can see just how awkward and ungainly it looks on wrist. So much weight in the top half of the watch, so little weight underneath the wrist. It's not going to be all that fantastic unless you wear it super tight. And you can't exactly swap it out for other strap options because of that 18mm lug width. That will look frankly ridiculous with a 41.7mm case diameter. I don't do it very often, but I must admit it is fun occasionally. I thought this one deserved a proper roasting. If you want an Orient, buy a Komatsu. It is infinitely better than this. If you want an Orient reissue, buy the 1965 Dive King. It is so much more attractive. If you desperately want a reissue and you're not fixated on Orient, then buy one of those aforementioned Timexes. They may be a little bit flimsy, a little bit rattly and a bit overpriced, but at least they're charming, something I do not see any evidence of in this Super King. And this is the first and probably the last time you'll hear me say this on the channel. If you really want one of these, buy a vintage one, and at least then it will be authentically 1970s and not just this god-awful rehashing. So there you have it, the Orient Super King. This one should have stayed in the 1970s. There was no need to bring it back, I promise you. Ugly from just about every conceivable angle, the proportions are all wrong, the specs aren't that fantastic, and neither's the price. It's a no from me. Thanks very much, I'll see you in a future video.